So I want to do a commentary on Matt Walsh's new documentary, What is a Woman? And to do that, I need to talk through a lot of things about my perspective and about myself and that sort of thing, because I have a perspective on this that is nuanced, and because of that, it's something that is neither going to satisfy this side of the debate or this side of the debate. Both of them, hopefully, will be left disagreeing and dissatisfied by what I'm about to say. And I think that's a good thing, because I think new grounds and new perspectives and new truths are arrived at when we find a level of clarity that does not satisfy the ideologues on either side. Basically, I think you're making sense when you say something that people on the left think is conservative and people on the right think is liberal, basically. And so that's where I fall with this documentary. What is a Woman is a documentary that was put out by conservative firebrand Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire, and he is using the titular question as a rhetorical device to try to force certain uncomfortable truths in the trans debate and that sort of thing. And the through line of the documentary is that he asks all of these people who are supposedly progressive experts on gender what a woman is, and they give him roundabout answers like, first of all, why do you care? Why does it matter so much to you? Why is this important to you? And then they say a woman is anyone who identifies as a woman, which is a circular answer, circular logic, and that sort of thing. So the documentary is understandably incendiary, and understandably, I will say, raises a lot of good points, a lot of things that need to be discussed. For example, I don't think that there is a good discussion going on about the long-term side effects of gender reassignment surgery. I will not say gender affirmation surgery, but gender reassignment surgery. Now, I will say again, from my libertarian perspective, you do you. You have to live your life. You have to decide what's best for you as an adult. I don't think that extends to children. That is, when you are a child, when you are legally under your parents' care, it is their job to raise you to the best of their ability. So when you're an adult and you're on your own and your life has become wholly yours, from a legal standpoint, it's your body, your choice. You do you, and you live your best life. And I will say, by the way, I don't say that lightly. That is something that I strongly believe in, something that I live myself, and it's the basis for things like my pro-choice opinions, why I'm pro-choice, pro-abortion access, and that sort of thing. So this is not something that I'm saying lightly or dismissively. Now, that said, Matt Walsh is somebody that I find utterly contemptible. I would say that he and I agree politically maybe 10% of the time. And I say that because if you honestly sit and listen to any political commentator of any bent, no matter what, no matter how much you disagree with them on the whole, they will eventually say something you agree with. That's inevitable. So I say I agree with Matt Walsh maybe 10% of the time. And, if you want to know where my politics really lie, I would say I agree with Bill Maher about 80 to 90% of the time. So, anyway, but Matt Walsh is not somebody I like or agree with. He is, again, anti-abortion, very much opposed to abortion. I am very much the other direction. He is somebody who wants to drastically limit as much as possible, and that's quoting him directly, limit as much as possible the people who have the right to vote. I want everybody in this country to have the right to vote and participate in the electoral process, and on and on and on. We disagree on many issues, nearly all of the issues. On top of that, he's a hypocrite and an asshole. He is somebody who on his programs, he loves to go around branding people as assholes or a-holes, as he puts it. But he loves to call people assholes on his program, and he called a woman an asshole because this is in reference to like a blog post or Reddit post she put up, but he called a woman an asshole because she served her adult family macaroni and cheese. And he thinks that macaroni and cheese is for children, and adults should not be eating macaroni and cheese. He did the same thing for a man who he said that he made the same accusation to a man who was at age 40 throwing a birthday party for himself, saying that birthday parties are for children and grown-ups should not have parties to celebrate their birthdays. So he called that guy an asshole. But then after all of this on and on and on stuff, casting aspersions on adults who do anything child, or have any what he would describe as childish interests or anything like that, and I have someone who has plenty of pastimes he would describe as childish and infantile. After casting aspersions left and right on all these people, in one of his commentaries, he actually says that he loves to eat Scooby-Doo fruit snacks, so much so that he has to buy his own Scooby-Doo fruit snacks and hide them from his children so they don't eat them. It's like, oh, okay, well, at least Matt Walsh has not only when he says hypocritical things like that, he at least has no hesitation about identifying himself as an asshole as well. But on top of that, like, for example, he gave this, he did a commentary on this teenage internet influencer, this internet celebrity. There's a teenage girl whose father ultimately had to shoot one of her stalkers to death when the guy broke into their house. And Matt Walsh's big takeaway from that, his big commentary, was that the internet is making it too easy for anybody to become famous without doing anything to deserve it. Now, that one sentiment right there is something that would fall within the 10% of things I agree with him on. But what he does is immediately after he says that in that commentary, he goes to the sponsor with no sense of irony, no sarcasm or anything. He goes right to the sponsor for that video, and the sponsor for that video is an internet website that will give you the legal status of being a Scottish lord by selling you a small plot of land. God, hypocrite much? Anyway, so that's a lot of noise to say that Matt Walsh is not somebody I like on the whole, somebody I find generally contemptible, and if that weren't enough, he has this horrible rusty drain pipe of a voice that sounds like his whole intestinal tract got turned upside down and he's trying to have kind of a bowel movement by vomiting. That's what his voice sounds like to me. I try, and I say that, I know that I say things like that for good comedic fodder and everything, and in humor. I say that, though, catching myself that's not, I know that that's not a productive way to talk about anybody. Now, I'm sure Matt Walsh would not care that I said that about him, but I also want to pause and say that's not a productive way to talk about anybody. We don't, and I say that because a lot of people I know will hear me say, oh, you owned him, or that was, no, that's not the point. This is not about ownage or anything like that. But suffice to say, that's about 5 minutes discussing why Matt Walsh is not somebody I like, not somebody I care to like, or anything like that. However, I have to say I respect his boldness in being willing to do this documentary. Now, it doesn't take a lot of boldness on his part because it's going hard along a party line that his viewership wants him to follow and is already paying him to follow. But it's still refreshing when it's refreshing when bold statements are made in a discussion where everybody's pussyfooting around the issue. So, because of that, I like the documentary on that level. There are things in it that I agree with and things I don't agree with, but I want to take an opportunity to talk about one very important thing, and that's my own background. See, nowadays we do this thing where we try, we're expected to enact social progress among individuals by saying, hey man, you're not like me, and that means you haven't suffered the way I have. And that means that you were over there being happy and having a good time while I was suffering. And that means that you're privileged, and you need to learn about your privilege, and you need to humble yourself before your privilege and kiss my ass in process of taking on a lifetime of learning about your privilege. And that's the thing is, that's a horrible way to try to get people to sympathize with you and try to enact social progress. It really is. It used to be that the way we connected with people was to say, hey, you're not like me, and I have suffered in ways you can't relate to, but you have suffered in ways I can't relate. Or I have suffered in ways you have not experienced, but you have also suffered in ways I have not experienced. And you know what? Through it all, despite our differences, that commonality of pain and suffering is innate to the human experience. Let us form fraternal bonds of brotherhood on the basis of that. Let us begin to understand people on the basis of that. Let us lift each other up together. A rising tide lifts all boats. And let's go forward lifting up other people that way and having mutual compassion for people that way. We used to do that, and we don't anymore. And I think that's much to our detriment. But I want to bring this up because a lot of people want to jump in and say, well, hey, you don't know what it's like to be LGBT. And in the words of Dave Chappelle, sit down, bitch. Because this is one area where, yes, I have had this experience. Even despite being a straight identifying white male, and I'll discuss some things in a moment that will cast a shadow on me being strictly heterosexual, but for all intents and purposes, I grew up, I was a straight white male who grew up experiencing the life of a gay teenager, even though I didn't identify that way. What am I talking about? Well, first of all, I grew up naturally having a tremendous amount of sympathy for the gay community anyway, because when I was a little kid during the 80s and early 90s, in the worst possible era of the AIDS epidemic, we went to a very progressive church. It was a Baptist church, but it was a very liberal, forward-thinking Baptist church. And there was a huge LGBT population. Well, the T part was not really part of the public discussion yet, but there was a huge LGBT population at this church that I went to. And when you're a little boy, a little kid, you're not putting a lot of thought into what's going on at the adult level. It's here's Mr. So-and-so, and this is his friend, and that's as far as you think about it. Like, you don't put any more thought into it beyond that. But, dude, my parents were losing a friend a week because of the AIDS crisis. Seriously. It was, you have no idea. And and that's part of why it's a side tangent. That's part of why I get irritated with the people that are the so-called bug chasers, because the gay men that intentionally infect themselves with HIV because it feels like it gives them platinum status in the gay club or something. Those assholes, it's like, motherfucker, not only is that self-harm, not only is it demented and stupid for you to do that, but it is extraordinarily disrespectful to all of the lives that have been destroyed and lost because of that disease. And, I know I sound like an old fogey, but man, kids today don't know what it was like. You don't, man. It was insane. Anyway, so that's reason number one. I saw it happening at a very formative age. But also, when I was going into my teenage years, I moved with my family to a small town in Mississippi. And and I don't want to say where or say anything that I've said it before, but I don't want to reiterate it anyway. But I was living in Mississippi, and I experienced a level of prejudice and hatred and bigotry that if the average triggered Gen Z college student ever experienced one day of what I went through, they would be chewing the paint off the walls in an insane asylum somewhere. Oh my God. you think that you are triggered and experiencing horrible bigotry because your college professor said black people instead of Nubian inclined equal Americans or something like that, or whatever the current political correct term is. That's got you screaming bloody murder in the quad of your college and demanding the guy's head on a stick. You would not last 2 seconds in what I went through, motherfucker. And that's part of why I get pissed off at the current snowflake generation of progressive activists, because you have absolutely no concept of no perspective whatsoever. Anyway, we lived in Mississippi, and I'll tell you, man, it's one of those things where this is where I have to consciously choose to love people. I have to consciously make a choice to love instead of acting on anger and hatred, because I have such a thorn in my side about Mississippi. It's not even funny. This country does incredible, amazing things. It does beautiful things. It goes to the moon. We go to the moon. We enshrine individual rights into our laws. We have amazing innovations in the areas of science and medicine and art and technology and entertainment and media and on and on and on. We do incredible things. And through it all, Mississippi has to be dragged Weekend at Bernie's style into the 21st century every time. No matter what cool thing this country wants to do, we have to carry Mississippi along Weekend at Bernie's style with us. And I was at ground zero for that level of bigotry and hatred. And I'm not just talking about getting called faggot by the local equivalent of Johnny Lawrence. I arrived at a place where I was like an alien creature to them. I was autistic. I was on the autism spectrum. I did not know that at the time. This was over 25 years ago, when autism spectrum disorders were not understood like they are understood now. And people did not understand it. I did not know what I was. They certainly did not know what I was. And what they contextualized all of my awkwardness and weirdness and strangeness and my sensitive demeanor and my reserved behavior and my, the fact that I preferred musical theater and the arts and humanities and reading books over slaughtering innocent animals in the woods and watching wrestling and football and all of that. They internalized that as me being a faggot. And what happened is all of those dumbass, hayseed, deliverance, straw dogs, I spit on your grave style rednecks went home to their equally demented, deranged fathers and said, "Daddy, there's a new faggot at our school." And their daddy said, "We gonna get that faggot out of our community." And you think I'm being funny when I say this? I'm not. This is exactly what you're dealing with. And and I encountered, from not just from my schoolmates, but from the community at large, a level of hatred and bigotry and xenophobia that you would associate with something like the movie American History X, that you would associate with people like the Westboro Baptist Church. I've been there. I've seen it. It was horrible, beyond imagining. There were mornings where I would vomit before going to school. There was it got to a point. It got to a point where one of the counselors called my mom and said, one of the guidance counselors called my mom and said, "We will remove Jordan from school if that's what he wants. He never has to come to school again. We will take him off the registry, the data out of the database and everything. He'll never have to go to school here or at the county school or at any other school in the area. As far as we're concerned, he doesn't exist. He doesn't have to go to school anymore." My mom asked me how I felt about that, and for 2 seconds it sounded appealing, because one, it would mean that the torment would, a lot of the torment would stop, and I could just hide in my house and never go out and never have to deal with this horrible, disgusting, despicable redneck community. I could just hide from the world. That was appealing. Two, it was appealing because what teenager doesn't like the thought of not having to go to school anymore? But anyway, I thought about that for about 2 seconds, and I said, no, screw it. They're not going to deny me. They will not deny me my right to a public education simply because a bunch of school administrators that are secretly on the side of these fine, upstanding Christian boys that are doing all these horrible things. They just because they care more about crowd control than justice and being on the side of right and all of that. No, they will not take that from me. And I've alluded in other videos about trauma I experienced with boys in my school that would beat up girls for talking to me, and that was an outgrowth of that. Of them not wanting their women folk to talk to a faggot and all of that stuff, and it's this very close. It's like a blood cell, white blood cell, kind of surrounding the disease and pushing it out. That kind of thing. That's what it felt like. Like we're just closing our culture and pushing you out on the outside of it. There was one openly gay kid at that school, and he was a couple years older than me, and he had to be escorted from class to class by a teacher every day just to maintain order. It was fucking insane. I bring all of that up to say, no matter what you think about my commentary here, you don't ever tell me that I don't know what it's like to be gay, because I have fucking been there. Even though I never identified that way, I've fucking been there. But I want to talk about the part 2 of that story, which is I did the last 2 years of we moved back to Georgia, and I did the last 2 years of my high school at a performing arts high school, which, as you can imagine, had a huge gay population. And I thought that was all to the good. I had no problem with that. And I made a number of gay friends, people that I stay in touch with to this day, and good for them, man. They're living their best life. That was when it was around that time that I first learned about what the concept of being transgendered was. Because up until that point, I knew about, I knew that there were men who fancied themselves as women and would wear, dress in drag, put on women's clothes to be outrageous and that sort of thing, drag queens and things like that. I understood that. I, at the time, did not know about what being trans was or understand it. And my first introduction to the concept was when my dad showed me a newspaper article about a former coworker of his that he'd worked with a number of years ago who had gone and had gender reassignment surgery, had gone from being a man to a woman, essentially. And the way he introduced it to me, it was like this guy's name was like Eric and he became Aaron or something like that was the name of the person in question. And my dad showed it to me and explained that he's had an operation called, I think he explained it's called being transgender or something like that, or transsexual at the time would have been the expression. And he's had an operation where he started out as a man and now he's a woman, and they had an interview with the person. And I read this now woman's story. And I recall in the article, like they began using male pronouns and switched to female in talking about his backstory, and then when it came to the modern situation of it being a woman, they switched to female pronouns. He being a woman, I'm sorry, switched to female pronouns. And I read that, and I had no problem with that. I empathized with that person instantly because of everything I had been through. I understood prejudice, I understood hatred, I understood bigotry, and I understood that this person, what my heart went to in reading about that was this person needs support, this person needs love and compassion and all of that. This person needs people to support them and care about them, irrespective of what you think of this identity that they have. Now, I will say this, the operation, quote unquote, in question was not explained to me by my dad, not that he would have had the medical knowledge to really talk about it, But at the time, what I didn't understand was that this was a purely cosmetic procedure. It's not turning, quote unquote, turning you into a woman in the sense of like implanting an actual womb that it allows you to give birth to children, or to, changing your DNA, changing your chromosomes or your DNA structure, or anything like that. But for all intents and purposes, this person was now a man living as a woman. Good for him, her. And him becoming her, I should say. And then my next encounter with transsexuality came in a rather unusual way at that school that I mentioned to you, the performing arts school. There's this one girl that I was getting to know, and I kind of liked her. I wouldn't say I was like crushing on her or anything, but I could kind of see it going that way possibly. And so as I was getting to know her, this friend of hers who was a gay guy, he came to me one day and said, "Hey, so I understand you kind of have feelings for name of person." And I said, "Well, yeah, I think she's all right." And and he said, "Well, we wanted you to know that name of person is a pre-op transsexual." And actually, this was my first encounter with the word pre-op. He had to explain to me what pre-op meant, because I had not heard that expression before. I did not know that there was such a state as being pre. I thought you just, I just thought you just went in for a vagina surgery and came out and that was it. I was very uninformed about it compared to what someone would be today. Very uninformed about it compared to what someone would be today. And so he explained that to me, and I went to the girl and I said, I was told this, and this. Is this true? And she said, yes, my birth name was Josh, and she showed me some photographs of her before her transition when she was a boy and everything like that. And and my reaction to that was to think, wow, this person is really trusting me with something deeply personal to them. And I feel really touched and really honored that she would share this with me and make me a part of this, something that's obviously very important to her. That was my reaction at the time. But I also thought about myself, and I thought, well, I'm physically attracted to this person who is a pre-op transsexual. So I want to look into that. And this was a weird silver lining to the extreme anti-gay bigotry that I encountered, was that it kind of gave me carte blanche to just explore. I didn't feel like I had anything to lose, so I could look at, I could go, for example, go read gay erotica and things like that and think about how I felt about it and what it said to me in an atmosphere where there really wasn't, there was really nothing to lose. So it did kind of open that opportunity. It's kind of like in Deadpool, congratulations, you finally reached fuck it. I could just, who cares? I'm already at the bottom. So I remember that night I went on the internet and I looked up pre-op trans porn. And I looked at it and I thought, there are some women here that are absolutely beautiful. I mean, and I really thought of it. I thought, yeah, these women who have penises are beautiful to me. And I internalized, it's never been something that has been such a profound, I've never pursued that literally physically with a person. I've never, sexually consummated that with another person. I've only ever dated and had relations with women. Biological women. I don't like the expression cis women. Anyway, biological women. And so I've only ever had that, but I recognize that as an incorporated part of my sexual identity. And so I've experienced that. And and that was very moving and very meaningful to me. And to this day, look up a woman like Bailey J is a great go-to example. I think she's absolutely beautiful. I don't deny that. And I would say, I don't want to say something like, if I had the opportunity, I'd totally smash or something like that, because I haven't had the opportunity, so I don't know what I would do. But in the abstract, it's appealing. Anyway, now, the thing is, I bring that experience up. I found out over a decade later as an adult, through a mutual friend of ours, that actually she was not a pre-op transsexual. She was just pulling my leg. And she was that was all just an elaborate prank that they were pulling on me. And the pictures that she had shown me were from when she was prepubescent, and during that time, she at like age 12 or 11 or 12, she had a pixie cut, so she looked like a boy. So she was able to pass that off and everything. And she later apologized to me for that, for jerking me around that way. But anyway, so that became a part of it. And then I will impart one final anecdote, and I know this is a lot about me in a commentary on the documentary What is a Woman. One final element of my experience with the transgender identity and things like that. I had years ago, about 10 years ago, I had a jazz trio that I had put together, and we were, looking for residency gigs, as you do with a jazz trio. And one of the gigs, the drummer got us this really cool gig up on a lake in North Georgia, in the North Georgia mountains. It's a very swanky one percenter kind of country club environment, if you will. And they had this really cool thing where they would take their yachts out on the lake to party and everything, and then the band, the live music would stand. We would set up in the parking lot and play out to them. It was kind of a cool concept. So my jazz group got that gig, and we were potentially going to get that gig for the entire summer, the entire boating season, or whatever their plan was for that. So we had many hundreds, if not thousands of dollars potentially to come in from this gig. And we played the first gig. The bass player brought a friend of his who was in the process of doing a male to female transition and was living as a woman, and very obviously living as a woman, but at the same time obviously not fully transitioned yet. She came out with us at the first gig, came there with us the first gig, and they were very nice to her the whole time, very welcoming and accommodating. But then after the gig, a week or so later, the drummer came to me and said, yeah, so it turns out they don't want us back at the club. They didn't like name of person, they didn't like her, and that we brought a transsexual to our show, to their club and everything. And I said, well, screw them, we don't need their money. So I have actually lost money in my support for this issue, for these people in this issue. So don't, I say all of that to say, when I talk about this documentary, do not think I am ever coming from a cold-hearted place about anybody, or that I am not sympathetic or not understanding of what people in the LGBT community go through, because I've gotten it in a very real way. I have experienced, and I can't remember, I've been going in this video for half an hour now, but I can't remember if I already said this, but look, if the average Gen Zer experienced one day of what I went through, they would go batshit crazy. Anyway, so that comes around to my concept on this documentary. And I think that Bill Maher, who I mentioned earlier, raised a very important point with regards to the way what has happened with the trans issue and a lot of issues like that, which is that the Democrats and the progressives seem 100% focused on minority issues that do not affect the overwhelming majority of the country. And I say that, issues that affect maybe 1 or 2% of the overall population. That's what the Democrats are focused on. And as a result, the majority of voters are feeling like the Democrats not only don't care about them and don't care about the issues they're facing, but actively despise them. And that very much opens them up to being assimilated by the Republicans and by the right. And that's the thing. I say, as somebody who despises Donald Trump, who never wants that nightmare to happen again, if we want that nightmare to never happen again, we have got to learn the lessons of history. We have got to course correct, and we've got to realize that, any politician we elect is a representative for the entire country. So when when they see things like Kamala Harris going out, celebrating the 4th of July by going and talking to a group of indigenous people about the bigoted racist hellhole that is the United States, they feel a huge smack in the face with that, and you're not going to get their votes. And I'm sorry, but you need their votes, especially if you want the nightmare of Donald Trump to never happen again. More so, you need their votes if you want to win the long game. Democrats are masters of winning every battle and still losing the war. And why did we just lose nationwide abortion access in this country? Because conservatives know how to play the long game. Why are we about to lose nationwide gay marriage in this country? Because conservatives know how to play the long game. Why are we about to lose birth control and prophylactic access in this country, as has been indicated by the Supreme Court majority? Because the conservatives know how to play the long game. Why are we about to lose so many of the things that we thought we would never lose in this country? Because conservatives know how to play the long game. And you may think it's pathetic and ridiculous that they think their eternal salvation hinges on whether or not they successfully enforce their religious doctrines on the unwilling masses, and I agree with you there. But whatever you think about that, you've got to accept that they know how to play the long game. And this trans issue is alienating people. And what I want to talk about in reaction to this documentary is why this trans issue is alienating people. Because I come to it and I think, I think about my own reaction to this, because I'm looking, like you are, I'm looking at my own history of experience, and I only gave you a sliver of my experience with all of my experience with the gay community and knowing what it's like to experience what they've gone through and that sort of thing. Why is it that someone like me, who has all of this automatic compassion and all of this automatic sympathy, could be so completely put off and disgusted by where the current climate around the LGBT where that demographic has come to? And the thing is that this documentary raises a number of important points, even if there are areas where I don't totally agree with Matt. I don't necessarily or totally agree with Matt Walsh and his implications thereof. He is somebody who espouses a concept of gender identity that is very, very rigid, that is the basis for the kind of thought that the gap-toothed rednecks I was referring to earlier used to use to mistreat me and a lot of other people. And he espouses that, and I don't support it or agree with it. His worldview has absolutely no breathing room whatsoever for any kind of variety of identity or approach. That he's very much someone that if you're like me and you enjoyed My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic when it was on the air, well, about the first 7 seasons. I stopped watching when they introduced the school for friendship and all of that. But anyway, somebody who enjoyed that, well, he has no concept of tolerance for that whatsoever. You're a filthy, disgusting degenerate, and you're a part of what's problem with the country and all that. So he has no breathing room whatsoever. Nevertheless, there are a lot of important things that I think are getting raised in this documentary. One thing is information about the long-term effects and potential side effects of gender reassignment surgery, which I don't think get discussed enough. But more so than that, is one of the things that he's exposing, this question, what is a woman, is a rhetorical device that he uses to show the lack of logic in the argumentation. You have, he has these ostensibly these people who are gender experts, people who are learned scholars and doctors on the matter, and he asks them, what is a woman? And time and again, they come back to this thing of, well, you wouldn't understand it. You're asking in bad faith. Why do you care in the first place? And a woman is anyone who identifies as a woman. And the thing is, you cannot escape the reality of the fact that the answer, a woman is anyone who identifies as a woman, is something that is aggravating and annoying and frustrating for people because it's a circular argument. And it's a circular argument. It doesn't answer anything. You cannot say, a chair is anything that has the identity of a chair. That's not a definition. That's not how it works. And what happens is, and this is not in the documentary, but what happens is when you try to bring that to the current crop of progressives, they do a wholly postmodern shift where they say, oh, well, these definitions are just impositions on us, and we don't need to think about these definitions. Those are constraining us. Okay, what are you becoming when you are no longer constrained by the definitions? You have to become something, and that something has to have an identity. And what's happened, what we really see on the meta level in this documentary is that conservatives have become people who go very hard and fast on objective terminology and objective definitions. And meanwhile, liberals and progressives have become people who live in imagination land. And there are people in the documentary who talk like this. And there's one woman, literally, she's this older woman with blue hair who does child gender transition therapy, which is, I do think is disgusting. My strong beliefs, by the way, when you are an adult, you're an adult, your body, your choice. When you are legally your own person as an adult, your body, your choice. When you are living under your parents have the legal right to dictate how you live, and they will guide you, and there is wisdom in following the dictates of your parents. So there is wisdom to be found in that. And that certainly does not contradict my attitude that when you are an adult, it's your body, your choice, and good for you. And by the way, yes, I do think there are circumstances where for teenagers, their body is their choice. In the case of abortion, that's one example where I do believe that the teenager who seeks out an abortion does not need parental approval. That's a whole other topic. I'll talk about it somewhere else. But in terms of your parents guiding you and how they want you to live and giving you their values and all of that, that is something I agree with, them having the right to do. So anyway, I bring that up to point out that first what has happened is there is an issue, and this is not directly stated in the movie, but this is something that I want to put on the table to hopefully gain new ground. The real issue at the heart of this is you have one side of this discussion that does not believe that trans people are the gender that they're transitioning to. And you have another side that is afraid to acknowledge that, afraid to acknowledge any validity to that. And consequently, you have people who are coming to wedge issues like this, and you've got this side of people over here who are pushing this attitude of, if you're not immediately and totally on board with this, every single thing we come up with that we say is valid about gender and sexuality, if you're not instantly and totally on board with it, then you are a bigot and a horrible person, and you are worthless and disgusting, yada, 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 blah, 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 all of that vitriol and everything. People are seeing that, and they're saying, well, the conservatives are dealing with definitions of things, and I can deal with definitions. I can have a grounded sense of objectivity about the world and how the world functions and operates over here. I can't do that over there. And so people are able to establish a level of comfort and understanding about the world based on this worldview that's not allowed to them over here. And that's why the Democrats keep winning every battle and still losing the war, because they don't know how to play the long game. They kick doors open and demand that they get their way, every single time. And then when it comes time to put their beliefs and their agenda to a vote, they wonder why they don't get the support of the people whose doors they kicked open and yelled at. They don't metaphorically kicked open. They don't understand why they didn't get the support of those people that they yelled at and berated for being horrible people. And they can never figure that out. And they have absolutely no concept of presenting their worldview in a way that is palatable to people who might be on the fence. And that brings me back around to the charlatan woman that was assisting in gender transition and all of that with children. She says at one point, Matt Walsh defines to her that a man is someone with a penis and gametes and all that. He gives a very basic biological definition, and she goes, no, it's a constellation. And that's the thing. People trying to get a sense of certainty and understanding about an issue will be put off by someone who says, it's a constellation. Because that's the thing, the left does not have the capacity for self-reflection in this regard, and they don't understand that what people on the fence are seeing is someone who's going, come live in imagination land. That talking to people like this, making them in a way where they have to go, wow, like that's alienating and condescending and infantilizing and off-putting to people. And further, and it all it does when you answer Matt Walsh that way is further bolster support for his overall worldview, because despite being an unreasonable asshole, at least he sounds like an unreasonable asshole that's grounded in reality. And that's why I was taking so long to figure out what my response would be and what the context of my response would be to this documentary. Because do I agree with everything in it? No, I agree with some things in it. And I agree with some things and not other things. And rather than pick through what I do and don't agree with, what I'd like to talk about is the larger wedge issue that this documentary is bringing to the foreground. Because what happens is this is a very controversial documentary, so rather than choose sides and decide who you want to be yelled at and who you want to yell at in this ongoing frothing at the mouth rabid culture war, let's try to find some new ground. And let's look at this and realize that all of these over-the-top linguistic contortions that progressive voices are going through to try to have their cake and eat it too on the trans issue are just alienating people. And you are going to lose the votes that you need from those everyday salt of the earth people, the people who, as much as I have that personal thorn in my side about the hillbillies and rednecks in Mississippi, you know what? They vote, and they have the right to vote, and they should have the right to vote. And you need to show them that your agenda helps them and elevates them. And I'm sorry, but though they are going to be put off by things like, Kamala Harris celebrating the 4th of July by going and talking to a group of indigenous people about what a horrible racist shithole she thinks America is and things like that. You're not going to get votes that way. People have no desire to wallow in shame and misery that has been imposed upon them from an ivory tower. And the left is going to keep on losing until they understand that. And this is what was interesting to me, is that I was wondering how to respond to this, and I saw a video by none other than Rebecca Watson. And Rebecca Watson is somebody that's interesting to me because when she's on point, man, she knocks it out of the fucking park like nobody's business. And when she's off, she sounds like a complete fucking idiot. And again, it's that thing of like, I never agree with any person 100% of the time. So I actually recently retweeted one of her videos on abortion about the pregnant 10-year-old that had to seek out an abortion recently. Don't tell me it's not true. It's been completely verified. You're just not looking at the information, but it has been totally verified that did happen. Anyway, another topic for another time. But anyway, I really love that video, and man, she just hit a home run, grand slam home run with that video. The next video it referred me to was her reaction to this documentary, What is a Woman? So I watched it. And in that video, she did exactly the things that are alienating people from joining up with the so-called progressive side. First of all, she said, "I don't have to watch Matt Walsh's documentary. I can answer it without." She literally says, "I don't have to watch it," and she says that she doesn't need to watch it because he's asking the question in bad faith, and there's no reason to acknowledge it or anything like that. And so, right off the bat, she does the first thing that alienates people on the fence, which is saying, we have no reason to listen to the other side. We have no reason to acknowledge any potentially genuine concerns that you might have. If you have concerns that you think are genuine, then you are just a bigot and you are just dog whistling your support for right-wing extremism and all of that. So she does that. The second thing that she does is she says that she tries to compare the new science around gender and the science around gender to the kind of scientific breakthrough that was made when Darwin published Origin of Species and all of the controversy that caused. She's trying to say that the people who are on the fence are questioning or challenging gender identity ideology are like evolution deniers. And she goes on to then explain evolution at a level that a child could understand, and then goes on to try to explain gender ideology at a level that a child can understand, and saying that children can understand that most of the time people's inside identity matches their outside identity, but sometimes other people feel different ways and all that. And that alone is in and of itself not a good explanation of what's going on, nor do I think children really need to have this explained to them. I think it's a concept that's better understood at an older level. I don't think that children need to be inundated with this. Again, that's another matter. But she goes through that, and then she says, and then she finally says, she says this, and this is what blew my mind. She says, she tries to say that there's all this science. Now, what she does is she's not telling you is that unlike evolution and the origin of the species, where all of that science was done in the realm of science and biology and actual testing and actual ongoing rigorous research, and that the concept of evolution is something that has informed and expanded exponentially on our understanding of science and the scientific method. What she doesn't tell you is the so-called 50 years of research was stuff that was done largely in the realm of the mental masturbation world that is sociology and the studies departments of colleges, and that most of this stuff is actually just kind of imposed on people by way of political correctness and all of that. She doesn't engage with that at all. And then finally, she says this. She says, but ultimately it doesn't matter because, and this is a paraphrase, but this is what she concludes with in the video. She says, ultimately it doesn't matter because a woman is anyone who identifies as a woman. And that's the thing. That statement is so pig ignorant because she played right into the circular logic that he's exposing that he's showing in the documentary. And if she had watched the goddamn documentary, she could have maybe not made a complete ass of herself. And so that video gave me tremendous perspective on how to talk about this, because I realize that what has happened is the progressive left ostensibly wants tolerance and acceptance and compassion for people who are transgendered. And to this day, I still completely agree with that. So what is the new ground we can realize from the wedge issue that is exposed by this documentary? What we need to realize, the statement, see, Matt Walsh's attitude that it's always inherently wrong to acknowledge someone's preferred identity or anything like that, and his extraordinarily constricting, suffocating concept of how men and women ought to live, that's wrong. But it's also wrong to play this weird this weird game of linguistic parlor tricks to try to stitch together in this weird roundabout way the concepts of gender and sexuality so that they somehow become this interrelated concept, so that you can make this weird, convoluted argument that keeps you from having to confront the reality of whether or not a trans person is really the gender that they identify as. That's what all of these psychological gymnastics, intellectual gymnastics, are meant to avoid. So how do we rise above the dead ends on both sides of this argument? By going back to the concept of explaining transsexuality and transgenderism to people the way it was explained to me, which is, this person has a mind, whether it's a psychological condition or some kind of biological divergence in their brain, whatever the case, they have a neuroatypical state of mind that causes them to feel that they are a different gender from the one they were born with. The best way that we know of to help and accommodate those people is to have them live as the gender that they psychologically identify as, because that will be less distressing for them and less difficult for them on a day-to-day basis. Looking at themselves in the mirror and seeing something other than what they strongly identify as causes them distress, and the best treatment we have is for them to live their best life as the person that they want to be. What we realize and respect the fact that you may be uncomfortable with that because you personally don't feel that this person is quote unquote really the gender that they're presenting as. That is a valid concern. There are valid logical paths that down which a person can go to arrive at that conclusion, and we're not challenging that. We don't need you to think that this person is quote unquote really the gender that they actually are. What we need is for you to be supportive and compassionate towards this individual, not hurt them, take their feelings into consideration, and realize that while this is probably very weird for you, it's very weird for them as well. And we need your support. They need your support and your compassion. Don't yell at them that they're not really the gender that they think they are. Don't go up to a trans woman and yell, "That's somebody's son," or something like that. Don't harass trans people. Don't mistreat them. Don't deny them job opportunities because of what they're going through. And if we can, and that's the thing, we have to just work off of a basis of tolerance. Hey man, you don't have to think they're quote unquote really the person. For them it's true, and just be a friend, be a bro, and don't harass them about it. Don't harass them about it. Don't give them a hard time. And that's the thing. And then on the other side, realize that there will always be people who never totally agree with the way you live. There will never be people who totally agree with who you are and support who you are. And I say that having been harassed and bullied and persecuted, honestly, by the prejudice and bigotry of people who I am still in therapy about dealing with the traumatic memories that I encountered back then to this day. I say that as someone who has gone through 20 plus years of therapy trying to deal with that shit, and wishing to God that, now that the statutes of limitations hadn't expired long ago, so that I could sue some of these people for intentional infliction of emotional distress, for loss of capacity for the enjoyment of life, for hate crimes, for prejudice on the basis of sexuality, and a lot of other things. I really wish I could do that, but I know I can't. I know I have to move forward. I say that as somebody who knows what that psychological pain is like and knows where that pain is coming from. And my sympathy is truly and honestly with anyone who is suffering through something like that and going through that difficult time with their identity. You need our support. but you need our support. And the best way you can guarantee as much support as possible is to not antagonize people who are on the fence. That's what you've got to understand, and that's what we can take away from this documentary, if nothing else. And I will say in closing, if you heard everything I just said and your response is to shout transphobe at me or to yell at me about being some kind of bigot or to threaten me or be hateful towards me, you are exactly the person I'm trying to get through to. And what I want to ask you is this: do you not understand the value of the long game? Do you not realize that your needs are going to be better served in the long game by not alienating people, by making alliances with people rather than kicking them in the guts and demanding that they get on your side? That's the reality that you've got to understand, because the acceptance that you want for the trans community and for the gay community and all that hangs in the balance. Because every time that you go the path of being an absolutist and being unreasonable and being completely unreasonable and hurting people so badly that you become a bully in your own right, you are going to send more and more and more people over to the side of Matt Walsh, and neither you nor I want that. You know, my granddad taught his kids, one of which was my dad, taught them that if you're ever bullied in school, if someone ever bullies you in school, what you do is every single time you see them, without exception, every time you see that person, you beat the living shit out of them so badly that they're terrified to be anywhere near you. That was his idea of how you stand up to a bully. Now, I don't blame my granddad for wanting his kids to take up for themselves, and this was back in Mississippi, which is as you know, is a very, very difficult place to live, very rough and tumble place to live, as I just described. But answer me this: in your heart of hearts, do you think that that's the right way to deal with people? I don't think so. Because while I do agree that you should physically protect yourself, and there are people that, there are going to be situations where you deal with bullies that need a good smack to get the point across, you have to, like Nietzsche said, when you go to expel demons, you have to make sure you don't become one yourself. You do not stand up to your bullies by becoming a bully yourself. And that is what I want people to take away from not just this documentary, but the climate around it. Ask yourself, look at this situation, look at the precarious place that you're in where the Supreme Court is currently rolling back your rights, and ask yourself, do you want that rollback to continue, or do you want people to truly understand the pain that you're going through and the suffering that you're going through? And if you do that, if you want them to understand that, you have to begin from a place of mutual respect. And that place of mutual respect begins from understanding that people may have principled reasons for not agreeing with everything that you are doing or everything about you. And if you can respect that, if you can respect that there are people who are genuinely on the fence, and just say, meet me halfway, and halfway is all I need. All I need is that you're decent and pleasant to me on a day-to-day basis. All I need is that you're a kind person to me, regardless of what you feel about the deeper implications of my lifestyle or anything like that. Tolerance is what I need. I promise you, as God is my witness, tolerance is the basis for the compassion and the acceptance that you want. And that's what Christ was trying, one of the main things Christ was trying to get across to us was that, if we really want to move people's hearts and minds, it begins by loving them even when they're incapable of loving us. And that's something I wrestle with when I think about those assholes that mistreated me. I still have to consciously think about them as human beings that are hurting and in pain in their own right. Even if they're psychopathic, they can still be hurting and in pain in their own right. And I have to go forward on that, because that's what I want. I want an end to the argument and an end to the fighting. I want us to be able to live together. And at the end of the day, that's what we all really want. You don't really want to win these arguments, I don't think. I think you want to live your life. and be happy. And that is what we need to focus on, and that is what we need to address. And I say that very much to a progressive cause that I would like to be a part of, but I cannot be a part of when I see you, just being stuck up, ill-informed, arrogant assholes that want to alienate potential supporters into the waiting arms of the Matt Walshes of the world. So I hope that makes sense. Anyway, I might do an actual breakdown commentary of some of the more specific things in the documentary that are worth addressing. There are some factual statements that I take issue with, that kind of thing. I take issue with things like that, and or certain things that he said, certain citation sources, all of that. I might do a separate video on that. But anyway, those are my thoughts. My reaction to all of this is not just a reaction to the documentary, but to the world that has propagated this documentary. So I hope that gives you some clarity and some hope. And I hope everyone who sees this understands that what I want for all of you is tolerance.